Looking again at the account of Joseph as described in Genesis 41, we see that Joseph had found favour with Pharaoh, because by the grace of God he was able to interpret those strange dreams that Pharaoh had experienced. Now essentially those dreams spoke about the upcoming seasons. There were to be 7 really good years, great seasons with more than enough, record crops, productive livestock, all that you could ever need. However, that was not the end of the story. All of that was to be followed by 7 bad years. A severe drought would hit that part of the world. Now, because Joseph was able to interpret his dreams, Pharaoh put him in charge of preparing the whole land for what was coming. Joseph was promoted to second in charge of the whole nation, a position where he was completely responsible and only answerable to Pharaoh himself. His job, to prepare, to put aside the excess for what was yet to come. Now, if you know even a little about farming, you know what this is about. It is important to set aside and to prepare for the tough times because they do come. Now, it was only days since Joseph was in prison, wondering perhaps where God was in all of this, all the things that were happening in his life. And now he stands in a position of authority, together with the opportunity that it provided. Now, we might say from prison to palace. God clearly had a plan for his life, and despite the setbacks that he had encountered along the way, Joseph was being prepared for what was yet to be. God was in there and clearly in control. Notice that wherever Joseph had been, he had made a difference in the lives of the people whom he had encountered along the way. He had found favour with Potiphar. And then when he was imprisoned, he found favour with the prison warden. And then when he finally found favour with Pharaoh, he was rewarded in a wonderful way. And he impacted the lives of others for the better. You see, life wasn't just about Joseph. He literally made lemonade out of lemons, from the prison to the palace. And he trusted in God through it all. Now, the story of Joseph's life changes here. Pharaoh joins the list of others who could see that Joseph had life. So Joseph travelled around the nation of Egypt in a royal chariot, preparing for what was soon to happen, building reserves of grain and necessities for the tough times ahead. Now, when the 7 years of drought began, it was bad, really bad, but they were ready. They were ready because Joseph had listened to God's message to Pharaoh and had responded accordingly. Now, the question is, does God still speak to us today? Does he warn us about coming events? Well, yes, he does, but not always in the way in which we may expect. He speaks through scripture and prayer and other ways as well. But remember that prayer is more than just reading a shopping list to God. Prayer is a two-way conversation, speaking to God. That's for sure, but also listening. Listening to those thoughts that just pop into our minds and talking to him about them. God also speaks through others, even people whom we may not expect that God would ever speak through. Think Pharaoh. I'm also reminded of Elisha back in 1 Kings chapter 19, when the Lord said that he would meet him up on the mountain. Firstly, there was a windstorm. Was God in that? Then an earthquake. Was surely God was in that? A fire. But God wasn't in them. Finally, he came to Elisha in a gentle whisper, quietly. I wonder what the Lord has in store for you. Have you had any promptings that may be lingering in your mind? What is God saying to you? Listen with your ears and also your heart to what God is saying to you today. I believe that he is preparing his people for extraordinary days ahead, and we must be ready. I think that's worth thinking about. Have a great week.